If any video I make is going to be useful to you, it's probably going to be this one. This is going to be the video really on just troubleshooting in general. Computer problems, things like that. Going to try and make it short and sweet. Don't mind the clicking, it's this computer starting up. This computer here doesn't boot, doesn't turn on, doesn't power up. Last thing this customer did is he transferred the guts out of one computer case into this computer case. If you watched one of my bad case videos, then it was featured in one of them. So he decided to go through and do it himself, which it's not too bad, but the problem here, like I was saying, it doesn't turn on anymore. And I want to show you how you can basically troubleshoot this and really any computer problem in general if you follow this advice. First thing is figure out the history of it. I just gave you a history here of what just happened. His computer was working, he put it into a case, it doesn't work. You can then follow some logic on there. What could have happened based off of that? Well, did he perhaps get the wiring wrong? Did he get the connections down here plugged in the wrong spot? Is all the connections on the motherboard correct? Are they in the right spots? Are the power connectors correct? Is everything, firmly seated in, put in place? Is anything loose, not connected? Things of that sort. So, there's one of the first things you can go through and try. Just something, straight off the top of your head, common sense. What could have happened during that process that might have went wrong? So I've gone through and I've checked these connections. They're good. So then it comes into the factor of kind of the 50% rule is what a lot of people will call it. You basically want to try and cut your problem in half. With this here, it could be any number of things. Is it a bad motherboard? Is it bad memory? A bad processor? Is it a bad power switch? Is it a bad power supply? Is it one of these other devices in the system causing an issue? Is it something he had hooked up at the time causing an issue? So you got to take all that into account. So what you do with this 50% rule is you want to cut your problem in half each time you go through. So the first thing, we already went through, we verified our connections, those were good. It didn't start up. So let's start with the newest thing that happened with it. It went into a new case. Is there something wrong with this power switch in this case? So we're going to cut our problem in half from, is it the case or is it the computer? So we go through and we're going to test that switch. Easiest way to test it, let's go through and just try turning on the computer by jumpering down here directly. Just taking a flathead screwdriver, tapping on the power connector, power switch connector on there, which would basically be the same thing as you pushing the power button. We know that power switch worked before we put it in with the other computer, so it should work. Well, it didn't. Doesn't work. So now you've basically cut your problem in half here. It's not the case, it's something with the computer. So now you've got a whole bunch of other things you could check. Is it any of these other things connected to it? Well, let's go through and kind of use our brain and think of what most likely could have happened. Something might have gotten shorted out when he put it in, maybe he was standing on some carpet, something like that. So any of these components would be bad. Probability of, the power supply just going bad from being picked up and moved, pretty low, but it can happen. So let's go through and try taking out any add-on cards that are in here. So we pull out, things like the graphics card, all that, because if you don't have a graphics card in it, it should at least beep at you. if it doesn't work. At least it's beeping at you. Well, it didn't do that either. Didn't beep, did the same thing. You put the power on it, fans do a little kick like that, and that's it. So, okay. It's not any of the add-on cards once you've taken them out, tested that. So the next thing you can go through and test, because now your issue is it motherboard or the power supply at this point? Is the power supply not providing enough power to the motherboard? Does the motherboard have a short in it? Now you gotta kind of filter that problem out. So you test your power supply. I got a video on testing power supplies. Check that out. So you go through, you test your power supply. Found that this power supply is a little on the it works mostly, but it's providing power to work, and I've tried another power supply and it still had the same issue. So now we've cut our problem down from possibly being any of this stuff to being this stuff to being basically just this here. It's something with the motherboard. Could be the motherboard or the processor. That's where we kind of run out of our options on what we can do to test this thing. I could, go through, put another processor in, let that run, see if it works, but I have to have a processor that matches the same socket. I unfortunately don't have one of those just sitting around that I can plug into this one. And two, another factor for you, if I do go through, put a processor in there, and this board is bad, it could fry that processor. That's a factor too. And then if the board is bad, how can I test the processor unless I have another board? So this is where you got to use intuition. This is probably the final piece of this. What could be the most likely problem here? I could go through, tell the customer, yeah, you need to buy a new processor and motherboard. That's a little expensive. I can go through, get another motherboard for this, put that processor in it, and chances are it's going to work. Not too often do the processors get burnt out at the same time board gets zapped from like a static discharge, which is what I suspect happened. So, using that intuition, I want to say replace the board, reuse the processor. Memory should still be good, because I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but I also took the memory out, tested that separately when I did the components such as the cards, took those out, didn't get any beep codes with any of that stuff. Disconnecting things like the ribbon cables, I'd like to. That's what I all included with the taking out the cards. I'm not sure if that was clear or not, but that's what I did. So, probability is everything else is good. I'm going to recommend a power supply to them based off of the voltages I was getting off of it, because it starts at low and then it kind of picks back up. It's usually a sign the power supply is starting to go anyway. But its most likely issue is this board got fried by static electricity in the process of moving it from one computer to the other. And everything else should be able to be reused and work fine. So that's it. That's the issue. And that's what I'm going to recommend to them. And we're going to replace that, get it moving. And that is how to troubleshoot computing issues in basically under 10 minutes using history of the system, cutting the problems in half, dividing it down, getting down to the one single issue, the board, and when all else fails, use a little bit of your intuition and figure out what is probably the most likely issue. Use the intuition kind of a little bit to guide you to where you need to be, and then a little bit to help you really figure out that last bit when you're not sure, could it be this processor, could it be this board? Probably not the proc, probably the board, and that's going to be the case. And I'm going to order another processor just so I have one on hand for stock, but Probably not going to need it. So I hope that was helpful to you. If you did find this helpful, please subscribe, rate the video, and until next time, I will see you later.